We are reading the biography of my grandmother as written by my Aunt Lucille and my Uncle Charles. Go to my playlist titled My Grandmother's Life, and you will be caught up in no time. Today we're starting chapter 3, and this chapter is called Hamtramck. The newly united family started to make a home with Julia caring for the children and Joseph working long, hard hours in the mine. The next year, there was a bad cave-in, and as happened frequently in those days, men were killed. Joseph escaped uninjured, but said, "If I want to be buried, I'll die first." He had a souvenir from the accident, a small piece of coal embedded in his cheek. He never had it removed, and would always remind him his days as a miner in the bowels of the earth were over. They had been in touch with some of their old Hungarian village friends who had settled in a part of Detroit, Michigan called Hamtramck. There was a great number of Hungarians there in 1905, but in the next wave of immigration, a great many Polish settled there too. In that section, one did not need to know a word of English since everyone spoke the language of the old country. Julia thinks Hamtramck came from an Indian word meaning lots of noodles. In any event, the Hungarian women made lots and lots of egg noodles, which were a staple of their traditional Hungarian cuisine. The stiff flour and egg mixture would be rolled out paper thin to a circumference of about 36 inches on top of the kitchen table. It was then flipped over a 3-foot long skinny pole and carried to the bed where it was laid out flat to dry. Later, it went back to the table to be cut into 3-inch strips. Some of these were sliced into narrow strips for soups, others wider for stews and casseroles, and still others into 3/8-inch squares, 3/8-inch squares to provide some variety. No meal was ever started without some sort of soup and its delicious content of egg noodles. Joseph's mathematical prowess enabled him to work as a cement contractor for the city of Hamtramck, and they were able to purchase a 2-bedroom house on Young Street adjacent to Grand Boulevard in Milwaukee. The children attended a nearby grade school. Altogether, the family lived in this Hungarian neighborhood for about 10 years. The change in scenery from the old country to the new apparently was not enough to endear Julia to her mother, and she was twice again given away, this time to a famous Detroit architect. However, our view of this has changed over the years, and it was not an uncommon practice 100 years ago. Lots of children from large families were raised by others simply as a kindness and with no formal adoption action. Now I have to add my own view on this. I do not think it was out of a kindness. I think it was because these wealthier families could get free labor out of these kids, but that's just my opinion. Julia was now old enough to find her way back home and returned both times. Joseph was a kind and loving father and probably was the reason for her refusing adoption. When Julia Catherine was 12 or 13, she completed 6 years of school. Her parents, Joseph and Juliana, were divorced, which, again, side note by me, was rather unusual in that time. She and her sister Esther quit school and worked as domestics. Esther was especially trained as a seamstress and made her own clothes and did sewing to help support the family. Joseph Jr. was not much help. He had fallen down the basement stairs as a toddler and apparently suffered a severe concussion as he was bleeding from his ears and nose. From that time on, his mental development was delayed. Juliana stayed in the house with the children after the divorce, and when Julia was 13, her mother applied for her to get working papers. Michigan had a child labor law that prohibited children from working without parental permission. Working papers was a common solution. Strict implementation of child labor legislation was still a decade or more away. Although she'd been working as a domestic, the papers enabled her to get a factory job at the Champion Spark Plug factory in Hamtramck. Here she operated a machine which cut off the ends of the spark plug wires. Long hours were the rule, and she was paid $4 a week, which was considered a lot of money in 1912. In a few months, Her mother married a man named Smith. They sold the house and moved to Flint, Michigan with Julia and Joseph. Esther was left behind as a live-in domestic. Mr. Smith never had a job, and when the money from the sale of the house ran out, she divorced him and moved back to the Detroit area, this time leaving Julia behind in Flint, living with friends and washing dishes in a restaurant. After about a year and a half, she too returned to Detroit and found a job in a bookbindery filing papers. She lived in a boarding house where she helped with the cooking to pay for her room. This was also the place where Alex Szabo and Joe Dranovsky lived when they weren't out on the lakes working a coal carrier. And thus she met them for the first time. The year was 1914. A pretty girl of 15 years old, with both men very much attracted to her. She thought Alex was very handsome, but of the two, she liked Joseph the best. They would be gone all summer long, but she knew them for about 2 years. That wraps up chapter 3. Stay tuned. Chapter 4 is coming. And again, if you have any questions or comments, or it gets a little confusing to follow all the Josephs and Alexes and Julianas that are in this story, just drop a comment and I'll try to sort it out for you.